We have this Craftsman Snowblower. The customer brought in and said that whenever he goes to engage the auger, nothing's happening. So we're going to show you how to easily diagnose that, figure out exactly what's going on. Doesn't take any time whatsoever. So we'll fire this thing up real quick. So anytime we go to hit that engagement, all that happens is the belt starts squalling. So first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get into the belt. This is a Craftsman 24-inch snowblower, very common model, almost the same design on anything made by MTD. They use these on a lot of them. 10 millimeter or 3/8. There's 2 bolts, one on each side. You want to get those off. Once you got that off, basically it comes just straight up and out. So if you pull the assembly up and out to the right, it just pulls out. So nice and easy. A little bit more difficult to get back down in there. There's not a lot of room, especially on this one with this assembly in the way. So the belt here, the last one I did was actually the engine was locked up because the belt was stuck to the pulley itself. I don't see that very often, but sometimes if you keep sitting there and trying to engage it when it's not engaging, the edge of the belt just gets real tacky and bad. I'm looking down, everything here looks good. It doesn't look like the belt has pulled off or anything like that. Sometimes it'll fly off to the side and it'll get caught in between like the idler pulley here or something, and just keep it from turning there. The belt and everything looks good. So what that's telling me is that it's something to do down inside either the impeller or the auger fins themselves. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and tip it back and look at the front of the assembly. Now he did say there are a couple shear pins that he did replace in the unit, either 1 or 2. Not sure. It looks like I think this outside one was replaced. So one of the more recent ones I also had, they were having an issue with some clicking, and one of the tines actually bent enough that it was hitting the outside edge. So it was getting some ticking after it was locked up and after disengaging itself after he got it back going. So you want to make sure that none of these are hitting, and you can do that with the if you take both of the shear pins out of this side, you can spin these all around and make sure they're not hitting the outside edge. If you find it hitting somewhere, you can just bend it back in, or you can replace the whole assembly. Comes into 4 different sections on this unit. So as I'm looking here, I'm not seeing anything there, but as I look down straight through, what do we see down in there? The last one had a big old piece of pipe in it, so that was no good. But what I'm seeing down here is I'm seeing just a rock at the bottom side of the auger. Very, very common to see a rock at the bottom side of the auger. That's where they all, you know, gravity will grab it to the bottom, and it'll start on this side of the impeller fin. I'm sorry, it's the opposite way. This one got stuck at the beginning side because it is. I'm sorry, yes. Kind of confused here, I guess. I thought all 3 of them spun the same way, but yes, so it started here because it does spin. It's going to be a counterclockwise rotation here that it's going to be spinning to shoot it up and out. So it started over on this side, the rock did, and it got wedged over on the other side as it went. The impeller here, it's one of the most common issues for these to be wedged down into. There's something down in there. That's the only problem probably that's keeping this all locked up. So all we're going to do, we're going to come over here and we're going to get our trusty, you can use whatever you like. I've got a few just different ideas here on what you can use. Really anything will work. A lot of times we'll use something like this just to barely pry up on it. You can use a tire iron, you know, any sort of thing to pry on it and get it up out of there. Go ahead and get the camera set up here real nice. See if we can't get a good angle. I know that's not exactly the best view where we're sitting. See how that does. So again, basically all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna work it straight in between. Yeah, we gotta get a better view than that. That's not very good at all. I'm gonna work this straight in between the impeller fin and the housing. And all I'm gonna do, I'm gonna pry just slightly up. See, that one's not fitting real well. For this design, it's not a great idea. I'm gonna use I think the tire iron's probably the next best. And it works well because it's kind of skinny at the end. And all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna lightly pry upwards and try to get that to spin. Now you do want to go ahead and take the spark plug out just for any reason if that belt engages that engine and it starts up. Very rare, probably not gonna happen, but you can never be too safe. So if you pull here on your tire iron, a lot of times that'll allow that rock just to get right straight up out of there. Look at that. It just worked its way out just because I pulled it up and out a little bit. Now that's all it took. See, it's stuck at the bottom. There's a little square piece here, little square spot that it's actually stuck in. So this is just a chunk. It almost looks like a colored concrete or something like that, like a stamped concrete maybe. I'm not really sure what it's a piece of, but a piece of something. And what that did is I'm not sure if it was a piece of something that originally got caught here and that's why he sheared his pin and then it got sucked into the impeller or not, but regardless, that's what was holding up the impeller from turning. So now after you're done with that, you do want to go ahead and make sure that the impeller is not bent or touching in any area here. If it is, you're going to want to address that before you put it back together, of course. You also want to make sure that you grab the shaft of the unit. Go ahead and grab the shaft where the impeller is and try to move it up and down. You don't want any play there. If there's play there, it means it could have ruined that bearing also. So if you're grabbing on the shaft up top, try to move it up and down. If it's moving up and down, you know you have an issue. You know there's an issue with that bearing on the inside. If not, you should be in pretty good shape. So again, I'm not sure exactly what happened in this case. Last guy had a big old metal rod in it, almost this size around. I mean, just completely stuck up underneath. You can almost always get it out with just a pry bar, with just prying up underneath it. Now, if that does not work, you can always hit the auger one way or the other just with the hammer. Just come in and hit the auger fins one way or the other on either side or the other. So if you take it and you just go ahead and beat it either way, back or forth, you know, just a light tap. It doesn't take much a lot of times to get it going, but if you do that, that'll usually get it out also. So it really depends on what you have stuck in there and how stuck it is and where you can get to it, what you can get to it with. But normally a lot of times just a few hits with a hammer, piece of a pry bar, anything like that, just enough to get it moving to get that rock out of there. Now we're gonna go ahead and get this thing started back up and test it and see if that fixed all of our issue. Now we may have an issue also once we do this. I already kind of explained that, you know, the auger fins or the impeller could be bent, but that's not the only problem you could have. You could also have an issue with the actual belt being bad and causing an issue. So if the belt has a bad spot or anything like that in it that we weren't able to see from up top here, we may have to address that also. You may have to replace the belt if that's the case. So let's go ahead and fire this up one more time. We could have caused some damage to that bearing. So I'm going to look at the belt here all the way So again, if you couldn't hear real well, all I'm looking at is on the inside of the belt here as it's going. I'm looking for anything cracked, any kind of dead spots or any kind of spots where you can see it's been rubbing real bad on it. If that's the case, you'll want to replace this belt before you put it back in action. Now, it does sound like it is a little bit rough on the bearing side of things. So this is not hitting anything. It's not rubbing on any of the housing anywhere or anything like that. But it does sound like it may have damaged that bearing slightly. It's got some noise to it now. You can keep running it like this. Probably not going to be an issue. Otherwise, you can address the bearing issue. It's not the easiest thing to replace, but not super difficult on these either. There's just a couple bolts on each side. Whole front flips off. And you can take the bolt and the nut and the washer and everything. Everything pulls completely apart. You can replace that bearing and or the housing for the bearing in there. So that should get you back up and going though. Now, I will mention that when you start all this, a lot of times it's hard to see down in there to see if it's an impeller issue. A lot of times you'll have to let the snow melt off of it. You'll have to let it thaw out before you do any of this, because if you get water all back on the inside here in between that impeller and the back of the housing or anything like that, all that's going to do is freeze, and it's going to cause you that same issue. I've seen hundreds of them that come in and that's the only issue. People have snowblowed with it and put it away in the garage. It never had a chance to fully thaw out, and there'll be an ice block right behind the auger at the back. You know, a chunk of ice up in here anywhere can do that same thing. It doesn't take much to stop that auger from spinning or that impeller from spinning. It's the same thing around the side of the auger housing. It can happen here also with any piece of anything. So that should get you back up and going. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.